Hi, guys. Welcome back. We are excited to have a really special guest here today with us, and that is Maria Cross. Let me tell you about her before we jump into conversation. Maria began her nutrition career in 1994, starting out as a count, consultant. A nutrition consultant. After obtaining a diploma in nutritional therapy, she went on to obtain an MS in public health, food, and nutrition. Today, she's a consultant and writer. Since starting out on this path, she's also been a university lecturer and tutor, helping set up the first BS nutrition therapy degree in the UK. She has also published three books along the way. The latest is How to Feed Your Brain, about how food affects mental health. She specializes in diet and the brain, but doing so also means understanding the role of the gut and how it links to the immune system. You can't separate the immune system from the endocrine system or metabolism from muscle. The body works as a complete ecosystem, and the whole is always greater than the sum of its individual parts. When she's not consulting, she writes on Substack. She finds herself writing increasingly for an older audience, the over 55s. That wasn't her original intention, but with age, she finds she researches and writes for her own benefit as well as her readers. Maintaining a sharp mind and a healthy mood can become more of a challenge once you get over 55. Her goal is to make those challenges more manageable and less daunting. Mental decline is not inevitable once you have the knowledge and tools to keep everything functioning at maximum capacity. I, for one, am very grateful that you focus on that because I'm 62. So everything you say, I will be leaning in and hanging on every word you have to say. Before we get started about your book, which is what I'm so keen on hearing about, I'm wondering just a little bit about you. What led you to be interested in this field? Did you have some life-changing event? Were you always interested? Or did something that you were exposed to pique your interest? Tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are
Yeah,
to where we're sitting here today.
yeah. Okay. Well, I started off as a nutritional therapist, so I see people in practice, in clinic, and they come to see me for so many different reasons. And over 30 years, just at everything, ranging from gut issues like irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel disorder, to low energy levels, to menstrual disorders. Everything really. And when they tell me about their health problems, somewhere in the middle there, there's always some kind of issue relating to the brain, something that's not working properly. They'll discuss their gut and then they'll tell me, oh, and I've got brain fog, there's or
Yes.
low level anxiety and mood swings. Um, there's an endless list really of these mental health issues, I suppose. And I came to realize that these aren't separate matters. Everything is connected, and you know, not always. Obviously, stuff happens. People have life events that change things and make them feel a certain way. But often there is no particular reason. And I came to understand that these were not isolated symptoms. They weren't things that had to be managed separately, which is often the case. If you go to see a doctor or you go to see a specialist, you'll see this person, you'll see that person, you see that person, but there's no connection between any of these things.
Right.
And that's the thing that really struck me. So we know now. I mean, nutrition in a sense has gone mainstream. Any doctor will acknowledge that what you eat will affect your health.
Hmm.
But what has not gone mainstream is that what you eat can affect your brain. That is really, I mean, lots of people are aware of that and they do their own research, but it's off the radar of the medical establishment, I find overall. It's not treated as a diet related issue. And that I found really frustrating because sometimes really simple changes are all that are required, to help with symptoms, such as low level anxiety or depression or mental fog and all that sort of thing. So that's what really I think led me to write this book in the first place when I realized that that connection was not being made.
Yeah.
So that was how I started, really.
Yeah, and I love that, like I said, you address the over 55 because I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that as we age, that's what becomes more of a priority for our demographic. Would you agree with that?
Well, the brain health, yeah,
Yeah, that you've got more
absolutely.
people's attention. I know for me at 62, I describe my brain now that it used to be crisp and now it's just a little more mushy.
Yeah.
And I'm doing everything right. I mean, I eat single ingredient foods. I work out. I have a spiritual life. I have strong family connections. I make sure I sleep, get my water, all that. But still, I'm doing fuzzy things. And I'm like, I don't even know why I did
Yeah.
that. So that's with someone who takes good care of themselves. I would assume that if you aren't, that it's even worse. And so
Mm.
my question is it normal no matter what, as we age, to start in with the brain fog? And then I want to get into your book a little bit more.
Well, I'm afraid it is to a large extent. I mean, it is all manageable, but to a large extent, yes, because everything really does decline with age in terms of, you know what it's like. Energy levels decline, your
Yes.
metabolism declines. But in most cases, when it's diet related, you just have to know about it. You just have to work that bit harder. For example, we know that muscle loss is it's
Hmm.
one of the hallmarks of aging as well. So you have to
Hmm.
work that bit harder at maintaining your protein levels and then doing the
Hmm.
resistance training required
Hmm.
to keep your muscles and in peak condition. So I'm afraid it just means more work. Uh, you know, but you have to know about it. That's the thing.
Right.
So you can't just continue on the same road that you've been going down,
Right.
particularly people who haven't always been so attentive to their health and well-being.
Hmm.
You can only get away with things for so long. You know,
Agree. The
you know,
piper,
and
yeah, the piper will come calling at some point, and you're
absolutely.
never prepared and you never have enough money
Look at
when
how
he wants to be
teenagers can
paid.
get away without eating absolutely anything.
Yeah.
And
Or
if we were to
sleep
switch to their diet for just a couple of days, we'd be
in the fetal
exhausted,
position.
destroyed. So yeah. So yeah, it's true. As you get older, it is harder. Your absorption of nutrients also decreases, and so in some cases you need more. For example, protein. You actually need more as you get older. That is actually now acknowledged to be a fact. And even things like your stomach acid production declines. And if your stomach acid production declines, so too does your absorption of minerals, because you need that to absorb minerals. So, of course, then your bone density is likely to actually not be so good as you get older because you might not be absorbing calcium and magnesium so well. So, on and
Right.
on it goes. There's a long list, I'm
Right.
afraid.
I had to chuckle to myself when you said that energy declines as we get older. And
Mm.
my joke is I can still do the same amount. It just takes me longer to recover.
Yeah. And then you also have to go to bed earlier as well.
Yes. Oh yeah,
No
8:30.
staying up
I'm
all
in
night.
bed. Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't keep my eyes open past 8:30, but I'm up by 5:30 moving around and on the go.
Yeah.
And I do schedule a nap as if it is a scheduled meeting every single
Hmm.
day. I mean, that
Oh,
literally
do you?
is a part of my scheduled regimen every day to schedule a mid-morning nap. And I don't drink any caffeine. So
Mm.
I only rely on my natural energy and my food and sleep and
Yeah.
all my healthy factors. But I do find that if I can take at least a 20-minute, and I will do longer if I've got longer, but I am much more vibrant and mentally clear
Mm.
if otherwise my face feels heavy, I'm just dragging, but it's just amazing what a little nap will do. Are
That's
you?
amazing because that's actually also self-awareness. That's really being in
Hmm.
tune with what's going on with your body and recognizing what you need rather than trying to push through. Yeah.
Hmm.
Uh, and that becomes important as well. Again, that's something that not everyone is familiar with when they're younger. It's when you get older you hopefully become more attuned.
What's that saying? Necessity is the mother of invention. So, in
Yes.
other words,
Yeah.
necessity drives us to figure out, hey, man, I do not feel good. I don't like how this is
Absolutely.
going, and
Yeah.
I want to function at
Yeah.
my best
Yeah.
as
Is it
I get
something I'm
older.
eating? Is it my stress level? Is it I'm not getting enough sleep? There are all these things too. Yeah, you're right.
And I like to talk about too about keeping our baseline high so that
Mhm.
as we age, if you have a little dip, whether you're sick or have a fall or a life event, that if your baseline is higher, then you can bounce back up a little easier versus you have a low baseline going into a life event that
Mhm.
can really take you down and it can be devastating.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're quite right, actually. You need a little give, like
Yeah,
for a rainy day.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned about writing your book and the connection between nutrition and brain function. Is there something in your book that was such an aha moment that you wanted to shout it from the rooftops that people might not be aware of how critical some aspect of nutrition is on how our brain functions?
Um, I wouldn't say there was any particular moment where I became aware of it. I became aware of it constantly as I was writing the book, and I was researching constantly. There's a lot of research that went into this book. Um, and then I found out things that really sort of stunned me, really, about what nutrients do. That things that we know are important for physical health, like vitamin D, for example, vitamin D3 that is only made during the summer months.
Mm-hmm.
And then if your stores are low, you're going to get the effects of it. But the fact that it's not only required for gut health and for bone health, but it's also required for brain health. And
Oh, talk about
that
that.
connection's often not made as well. We talk about SAD, seasonal affective disorder,
Mm-hmm.
um, but we don't make the connection very often that that actually could be a nutrient-related disorder. So things show up. Another one that's a really good example, I think, is, for example, um, oily fish, which is very rich in omega-3 fatty acids. Now, we think of that as something that's really good for the skin, for the hair, for joints, because it's anti-inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely crucial also for brain function. So, and that doesn't get the attention I think it deserves as well. So yes, it was really basically a step by step of wow, fancy that, wow, all these things that happen, and more as well. The list just went on and on.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I love how we are a holistic being and how everything touches everything. We're just, I
mm,
liked your sentence about we're greater than the sum of our parts. We all just
yeah,
work holistically together.
absolutely, yeah.
And people that are struggling, our audience is mostly made up of those recovering from the effects of ultra processed food use disorder. We at Real Food Recovery, we're trying to help people move away from sugar and ultra processed food. One of the things that we know is that ADHD is often a comorbidity
Hmm.
with food addiction. People generally that have low dopamine levels are more susceptible to food addiction. When you were writing your book, I know that you covered ADHD. Do you want to talk about that a little bit with nutrition? In fact, I had seen a some scientific post the other day about ADHD in children and how they did this experiment. I think it was with 100 kids that they put on a whole food diet and how
Hmm.
dramatically in I want to say 6 weeks. It
Hmm.
didn't cure. They weren't saying that it cured, that the kids still had the ADHD, but the dramatic results in the children's behavior and
Yeah.
capabilities just by changing their diet. So, do you want to talk about the fact, is there some correlation there with mental health, with nutrition, with the effects that would make on people that are struggling to get off the ultra processed food? You want to talk about that and brain health a little bit?
Yeah, certainly ultra processed foods, we know that they're addictive. There's always been this argument about are they addictive, are they not addictive? But anyone will tell you that they are. Anyone who's been addicted, and they're designed to be. This is the thing that
Hmm.
really gets me, is that
Yeah.
there are actually food scientists whose job it is to work for the industry and create new, creative, imaginative ways of getting people hooked
Hmm.
on their food. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
whole idea. If they weren't
Yeah.
addictive, they wouldn't be doing it. And
Hmm.
you know, I read this as well. I don't think I put this in my book. Perhaps I did. I can't remember. But they found the sweet spot, the absolutely sweet
Right.
spot of addiction. And that
Yeah.
is a diet which is, or a product rather, which is 65% carbohydrate and 35% fat. So when you
Wow.
combine the two, that is the one that really dysregulates the dopamine reward pathways of the brain, and can lead to things like ADHD, for example. So that's the sweet spot, and it's a combination that does not occur in natural foods. You will not get a food that is 65% carbs, mainly sugar, uh,
Right.
and 35% fat. That's a unique factory made combination, and it's
Yeah.
modern combination that so
Mhm.
it's not a weakness. If it makes you crave more, it's not you being weak. It's you haven't, not because you haven't got the willpower, but it's biochemistry. It
Yeah.
could happen to any of us, and it's a sort of thing that if you ate a processed food like that once, it probably wouldn't be that effective. But when you do it again and you do it again, it's cumulative. And that's what
Right.
hooks you in. That's what gets you. And we know that children now have been brought up on ultra processed foods to a large extent. Mothers are feeding that in the womb. They're born uh,
Addicted.
addicted to ultra processed
Yeah.
foods because that's
Yeah.
all they know. I mean, we weren't brought up on that sort of thing.
Right.
It wasn't always great, but it was, home cooked natural foods.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised when I learned that mothers that live on a highly processed diet, their babies will be born addicted to
Yes.
that processed food,
Yeah.
which makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I often had that question about myself because I've loved sugar from my early, I don't remember ever not loving sugar. I mean,
Mm.
love, it's my number one drug of choice. And I think it wasn't from any past trauma or anything like that. I think it was just exposure.
Mm.
And I liked it and I had access to it all my life. And so you just develop those n- addicted grooves in your brain
Mm.
that
Yeah,
those,
that's true. I mean, I don't think babies are born necessarily with a sweet tooth unless they were exposed in the womb to a large extent. I think if you're not, then you can build it up. And by the same token, I suppose like any addiction, you can come off, you can wean yourself off it. But it's
Mhm.
it's not easy. You know,
Right. And
it's
then,
working.
when I was young, it wasn't a problem because I was hyperactive. I had the ADHD
Mm.
and I didn't have to worry about my weight or anything. That wasn't till menopause when things started slowing down that like,
Mm.
whoa, okay, now I've
Mm.
got a problem here and I'm highly addicted and my body is changing and things are catching up to me. So it's like what we were talking about earlier when we first started our discussion that that's whenever it becomes a real issue is when it becomes a problem for you and then you start paying attention more than you might
Yeah,
have
yeah, that's exactly
previously.
right. Yeah, and also addictions to sugar, for example, do intensify with age as well. Because
Is
it
that
gets
right?
harder. It gets harder to control blood sugar.
Is
That's
that why?
yeah, yeah, it's so true. And a lot of older people really develop cravings for sweet foods, which is a worrying thing because there is, a strong link with, for example, type 2 diabetes and
Right.
Alzheimer's. They called it type 3
Yes,
diabetes.
I want you to talk about that so
Yeah.
much. This is so fascinating. That and the anxiety, dementia, depression. I really want you to talk about that because that is a very hot topic as
Yeah.
our world is changing to more of these processed foods, what it's doing to our mental health.
Mm, mm. See, it starts really with something that's called insulin resistance. I'm sure you're
Mhm.
familiar with insulin resistance. It's when a constant diet of refined carbohydrates high in sugar and without enough protein and fat, it constantly fatigues the body, and the body constantly has to produce insulin. The pancreas produces insulin to deal with all that blood sugar because it's a potentially dangerous situation. You can't have elevated blood sugar levels. It's dangerous. So you
Mhm.
constantly supply insulin to lower that. But then the pancreas becomes exhausted after a while. And then that insulin remains high, and the cells in the body do not respond anymore to the insulin as well. So you've got that too. And so insulin's high, glucose is high. And that's the start of it. So it's insulin resistance. Then you get metabolic syndrome, which is, of course, a step away from type 2 diabetes. And it all ties to sugar.
Do you want to talk about, though, the connection between dementia or Alzheimer's
Mm.
and a high sugar diet or a highly
Yeah,
processed diet? Because I think that is fascinating, and I think that's
it
something
is.
that needs to be talked about more and more and
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, and as I was saying as well, also controlling blood sugar does become more difficult with age, and there is also the greater desire for sugary foods. I don't know if you've seen it yourself in older friends and relatives that they do love their sweet foods as well. So, and that's something if you recognize it in people, you need to try and stop it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, but so yes, I mean there is a strong link because sugar does enter the brain. Sugar is highly inflammatory. Glucose is very inflammatory. When it's in the blood, it damages his blood vessels. We know that for a fact, and that's one of the main issues when it comes to heart disease because it damages those blood vessels, but it also damages the blood vessels of the brain as well,
Right.
uh, and creates substances called AGEs. I don't know if you're familiar with those, advanced
Mm-mm.
glycation end products, um,
Mm.
which damage the brain even further. And the inflammation that's created leads to, first of all, pre-dementia stage. And then if it's not addressed, it can go on to become full-blown Alzheimer's. So it's one of the significant well, I couldn't say cause because it's never been established, but there's a very
Right.
strong association between diabetes and dementia.
Yeah, that is just something every human being needs to be aware of. Do you think there's any possibility of reversing some of this damage if their diets are altered? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, there is. There is some good news in all this. I know it does sound a bit dire, but obviously we know that there is no cure for Alzheimer's for dementia. Uh, it's an irreversible condition. I know there are certain medications that people can take which will um, slow down the progress of it, if you like.
Yeah.
Um, but they can't stop it and it will progress. However, having said that, there is a pre dementia stage um, called MCI or mild cognitive impairment. And this is something I mention quite a lot in my book because it offers so much help. At the mild cognitive impairment stage, it is reversible. But you have to know about it. That's the thing.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
So people don't know about it. There's certain nutrients, for example, that if they're missing in the diet, predispose you towards dementia and towards mild cognitive impairment. So if you can get those in, for example, the fatty acids I was talking about just now that are found in oily fish, one's called EPA and DHA, these two fatty acids, um, they have been shown to stop or slow down the progress to dementia. Uh, Another one is vitamin B12. In fact, vitamin B12 deficiency can look like dementia in older people.
Oh, interesting.
And that has been shown to reverse all symptoms of dementia. But you have to know that it's a B12 deficiency, in the first place. So that's the difficulty that we face. So, you just,
How do you protect yourself in all of this then?
yeah, that's a good question. How do you protect yourself? Well, if you can get self tested for these things, blood tests are great. I always get clients to do tests if I can because they tell you things that you need to know.
Hmm.
Uh, and even if you don't do the blood test, you can also do home tests. For example, the ones that diabetes have finger prick tests that tell you what your blood sugar levels are after eating a certain food. And of course, now
Hmm.
you can get those continuous glucose monitors.
Right.
that's something you can do yourself as well. Are you eating in such a way that's sending your blood sugar level all over the place,
Hmm.
or how do certain foods affect you? Because we're all a bit different, and certain foods affect other people more differently than they might affect you.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's a good way of monitoring as well. And as I say, get a blood test, to look at certain things as well to see your level of deficiency.
And of
That's
course,
something you can do, or get your
and
diet analyzed by
yeah,
some.
yeah, I was going to say, and just err on the side of safety, right? And just stick to single ingredient, non-processed foods.
Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's
Nutrient dense foods.
yeah, that's the
Yeah,
number one thing you
yeah.
can do in all disease prevention, right?
Well,
Is
absolutely. Yeah, we're not just talking about dementia and mental health issues. We're talking about, because again, this whole business of everything being linked, like
hmm
what causes cardiovascular disease, for example, can also cause memory loss problems as well.
hmm
We know that. So, um, yeah, so it is actually quite simple in that regard. That these things are linked. So when you focus on one thing, you're very often also helping other things too. I see that with my clients as well. I might focus on one particular thing, but their other symptoms will clear up as well at the same time.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice.
quite good
I,
actually, multitasking.
yeah, right. Do you feel like as we age too, we're going to talk a little bit about depression and anxiety. Do you feel like that is also highly affected by the foods we eat? Do you want to talk about that a little bit, depression and anxiety, especially as we age?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, depression and anxiety, I mean, of course, as I was saying earlier, they can be caused by all sorts of things, external factors. But one question I always ask clients to tell me that they suffer from mild depression or anxiety, I always say to them, do you know why? And it kind of takes them by surprise a little bit because people don't often ask them, do you know why you're depressed? And what I'm looking for is a particular answer, which is no. I don't. And I think that's what I want to hear.
That's why, yeah, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm paying you.
Yeah. If they told me, oh God, yeah, my life has been an absolute disaster and I don't know how I'm still here, then I think, okay, that might explain it. But if they say, well, no, I don't understand it because there's no particular reason why I should feel like this, then I think,
Good
yeah, light
point.
bulb moment, this
Yes,
means that possibly, or very, very possibly, that nutrition is at the heart of this. And there's
right.
either something missing, it goes two ways. There's either something missing in the diet, or there's too much of something else. Uh,
hmm
and that's what I'm going to look for to see what's missing, or what are you having here that you really shouldn't be having in your diet. So, yeah.
And nine times out of 10, do you discover that
Yes.
it's,
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I can't tell you how rewarding that is to make that discovery, to make that link.
yeah, do you
And even
have,
if it's not 100%, if it's in anything over 50% or like that, I'm happy with, and the client is happy with as well. So, yeah.
do you have a story to tell about somebody that you've worked with that where you've changed their diet and there's been a major shift in their health and well-being?
Oh, so many. I don't really know where to start with that over the years, but um, yes, yeah, definitely. And I suppose the ones that give me the most satisfaction are the ones that relate to mental health. Yeah, I can
Hmm
remember one particular woman actually. You just made me think of her actually, uh, who had who did have actually a lot going on in her life. She had a boyfriend in prison and she had various other issues going on, and she was really stressed out. And in her case, it was a simple question of actually regulating her blood sugar. Because on top of
hmm
that as well, her energy level, and she wasn't that old actually. This was a young woman in her 30s, but her energy levels were really low. Um, and I said to her, "You should be bouncing off the walls at your age." And she said, "I know, but I'm not." And her diet was just carb laden, and it was quite an easy task, to be quite honest, just by talking about blood sugar, how it affects the brain, um, removing all the refined stuff and the sugary stuff. And the amazing thing is that people, when you explain it to them like that, I'm always amazed at how willing they are to make the changes in their diet. Once I've explained and made the link with their own symptoms, I don't find it that hard to persuade them to go ahead and make the changes that I suggest, and they
Wow.
do. And in her case, the difference was quite amazing. It just, and she wasn't isolated in that at all. It's quite a common thing.
What I'm really curious about is once people make these changes, do you find they stick to them?
Yes, they do actually, but
Good.
not always. Sometimes, what they do, they it tails off because it becomes the norm. Feeling good
Yeah.
becomes normal. It's
Mm-hmm.
normalized, and then you start to forget how you felt before. So then you might be tempted to, I mean, and there's nothing wrong either as well by having the occasional treat. Yeah, that's the sweet spot you want to get to, is to be in control, as it were, of what you're
Mm-hmm.
eating. So never say never. Christmas, birthdays, whatever. If you want a treat. Um, but when you get to that point where you can do that and then turn your back on it and carry on where you left off, but some people don't do that. That's the issue, and they will gradually start increasing. And I've had people come back to me and
Mm-hmm.
say, "Well, I was doing so well, and now I'm not doing so well." And then we look at what they've done, and they've just gradually increased all the foods they had before. And I, all I have to do is to tell them to do what I told them to do before, and it works. They just
Yeah.
need someone to tell them, this
Yeah.
is what you need
Mm-hmm.
to do.
Exactly. And you mentioned that for some people they can have the occasional treat, but for somebody like me that registers very, very high on the sugar addiction scale, I can't. And
I
I
would
don't
not. No, no, no.
how do you that would be like telling an alcoholic, at
Yes,
Christmas you can have
exactly.
a drink.
Yeah,
So I didn't know how
exactly.
you advise people that really do have a true addiction when it comes to holidays and
Oh,
things like that. Because if I did that, I would slowly slip
you
back
would. Yeah.
into my binging sugar
Mm,
binges. And
mm,
I have fiercely fought to get off that. I can't
mm.
even sniff around it.
Yeah. You're right. It is like being an alcoholic, or perhaps it's the difference between someone who's who's a heavy drinker, for example, and an alcoholic, and someone who can drink occasionally. So yeah, I think there are certain situations like yours. You're wired differently, I guess,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
um, to other
Mm-hmm.
people. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to actually know where you are on that sort of spectrum of wiring. Are you
Mm-hmm.
are you right at the top end, as you obviously are, and you can't. You just can't have these sugary foods because
Mm-hmm.
it has that incredible effect on you.
Yeah. And if I could, I would have a piece of birthday cake and then giddy up on down the road. But I've never had a piece or a cookie or anything like that in my life because once
Mm,
I get started, I have to eat till it's gone or I'm too sick to
yeah.
carry on because I'm
Mm.
no quitter. And I tell people, if you can have like a snack bag size of Doritos at a picnic and you don't think about it again, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
But typically, that is not the case
Mm.
for
No.
people that do rank high on the food addiction scale.
Mm. Mm.
Let's talk about superfoods, brain superfoods and antioxidants, things like that. In your studies, do you have some foods that you feel like are brain powered foods, things that affect mental health and brain power more than over something else?
Yeah, I know that when people think about brain superfoods, the first thing that comes to mind normally is blueberries or
Right.
broccoli, and these things. And I think, oh yes, these are good foods. They certainly have their role. They have their place. But I call that a supportive role. They're not the main character in the thing. They have useful vitamins certainly, and they contain antioxidants, and antioxidants protect the brain from free radical damage. I think that's what they're best known for. Um, but the main foods that are the foods that actually uh, are part of the structure of the brain that make it work, and those are the nutrients that are found only in animal source foods. Um, or only in small amounts in plant-based foods. So when we think about brain superfoods, I'm more inclined to look at the meat, the fish, the eggs, dairy. You know, these are real nutrient dense foods that power the brain. And they also happen to be the foods that we evolved on to a large extent.
Yeah.
So, and that's no surprise really, because when I started writing my book, I didn't actually plan to start looking at evolution, which is what I ended up doing. I plan I plan to just basically, go through each nutrient that feeds the brain, that supports the
Hmm.
brain and gives it structure and so on, and detail where to find them really. And then once I got started, I ended up going down a sort of rabbit hole really of understanding how the human brain grew and developed through evolution.
Oh,
And
talk about that.
yeah, it was fascinating. I'm still down that rabbit hole because I'm still learning more and more about how the brain evolved and how it grew. It tripled in size, from when we first came down from the trees and started living on land and became hunter-gatherers, and then to well, throughout the whole of evolution over 3 million years, it tripled in size, and that's extraordinary, And I think, well, what did that? So when I started studying that, it was just an absolute revelation. And I think the most interesting thing I learned from that was that the nutrients that sent our brains into overdrive and caused them to grow way beyond any other animal are the same nutrients that today power the brain. They're the exact same nutrients that we must have in the diet. Nothing has changed. You know, our evolution is a very, very slow thing. Genetics don't change very quickly.
Hmm.
Our diets have changed in a flash, in a nanosecond. And there's this mismatch now between what we evolved on and what made our brains and bodies grow to what they are
Right.
today and to what we actually eat. Uh, and this was a thing that I found absolutely fascinating. And so throughout evolution, we became hunter gatherers and we ate a diet that was based on very fatty foods, in actual fact, like the large, the megafauna, mammoths, elephants, and so on,
Hmm.
and supplemented with whatever plant foods were in the where we found ourselves.
Right.
We moved out of Africa and we started moving around the world. So we had a very broad diet, So we ate whatever was in our environment. There weren't any shops, You had to go out and get your food yourself,
Yeah.
you know. You just had to go and get it. So you would hunt and you would gather. So these large beasts provided a lot of food and a lot of nutrients. And then it was supplemented with whatever plants were grown in the area that we found ourselves. And those plants
Hmm.
would have been obviously local and obviously seasonal as well. So it's almost like the meat and two veg scenario, that's
Hmm.
our grandparents and our great grandparents were brought up on.
Right.
We still need those same nutrients, but we don't get them.
I love that you mentioned dairy because that can be a hot topic. I mean, some
Mm,
people are like, no, you cannot have any dairy, and other people are like, yes, you can have dairy. My understanding is when I work with people, I say, how do you do with dairy? Does it affect you? Does it cause you to go wild and eat every amount of dairy you can?
mm,
And what type of dairy are you getting? Are you checking your labels and seeing that it comes from animals that have been treated well and grass-fed and things like that?
mm.
So, do you want to talk about your opinion on dairy, where you lie on that topic?
Yeah. Well, talking of evolution, well, we didn't actually evolve really on dairy foods. That is a fairly recent addition to the human diet. And a lot of people are sensitive to dairy foods. Some people have an outright allergy. Some people have an intolerance. Actually, I have a mild intolerance to dairy. I'm great on it occasionally, perhaps once a week at the most. Um, and if I have any more than that, I start to get eczema. And so
Hmm.
I have to cut right back again. But it's a mild intolerance, which is a great pity because I really do love it. And I would eat it every day if I could. Um, But for people who don't have a problem with it, who can digest it and have no intolerance whatsoever, it is really incredibly nutritious.
Hmm.
The nutrients that are found within it. For example, there's one fatty acid that's very high in dairy called CLA, conjugated linoleic acid,
Hmm.
which is actually recognized as to have anti-tumor effects. And it's only found in dairy and in meat. It's not found anywhere else. Um, and it has other fatty acids too, lots of fatty acids in it that are really healthy. There's a lot going on in there. Then there's also the vitamins and the minerals. We know about those, like calcium, for example. But the fatty acids that it contains are also really, really healthy. For example, it contains butyrate. You may have heard of butyrate. It's a really popular supplement at the moment. Everyone's buying it because it's so good for your brain. It's anti-inflammatory. It's also good for your gut. But it's actually found in dairy, and that's where butter gets its name from. So people don't realize it is actually a saturated fat. And the same goes for coconut oil. That's a really popular trend at the moment as well. These
Hmm.
medium chain fatty acids, which in the body are converted into ketones, and ketones are used as a fuel for the brain. When people who've got blood sugar issues, if they cut out all the carbohydrates, they start burning ketones. But you can get them as well from coconut and from dairy as well. So people don't realize they're having fatty acids, saturated fats when they buy these products. But
Right.
so yeah, these are really nutritious foods, and of course things like vitamin B12 as well, K2, vitamin K2, all these things that are really good for the brain.
Yeah, I'm sure people that are listening really are so curious. I know I am, and I bet people listening are going, what do you think she eats all day, every day? Do you want to talk about your own life and how you
Yeah.
eat to support your mental clarity, energy, metabolic health without being like obsessive or
Mm,
restrictive so that
mm,
you don't set yourself up for some type of eating disorder? Because we know we
mm.
have to be careful with that too.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
let's talk about you for a minute.
yeah. I have a history of an awful lot of gut issues. I grew up, they were unaddressed, gut problems. I see a doctor. I had a colonoscopy at the age of 7, um, and these were never addressed. And then as I got older, it was like an irritable bowel. I constantly got bloating and gas and constipation and irregularities, and it became normalized for me.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then in my teens, I also started to develop spots um, on top of that. And in my 20s, I still had them in my 20s. And I didn't realize the two were connected. That's the thing. Yeah. And I also had this really foggy brain. I couldn't, it was always, couldn't concentrate on anything, uh, zero concentration, reading a book, anything else, which everything was just really difficult. And again, didn't realize that was connected. And I saw lots of specialists and I never got anywhere. Uh, it wasn't until I started studying nutrition that, light bulbs were just going off all over the place when I realized that things were connected. And I got myself tested and discovered all these things that were going on. So, long story short, I just had to completely change my diet, which I grew up actually with no interest whatsoever in diet and nutrition. I actually studied languages originally, and it wasn't until I came back from living abroad and then started looking at different things, I realized what I was really interested in. So I started studying nutrition, not with the aim really of sorting myself out, but just because I found it such an interesting subject. And
Right.
then I thought, oh, hang on a second, why don't I have all these tests that I'm talking about? And I did, and I discovered all sorts of things that were wrong with me. And I had to put them right. So it just meant basically clearing out all the rubbish that in my diet. And there was a lot of it, really. I didn't know that, but so it just normalized my eating. And now I have no gut issues whatsoever. But it's still my weak spot. I could easily tip over into irritable bowel with a few days of bad eating. So
Hmm.
I just don't do that. Um, but my typical way of eating now is that, well, first of all, I don't eat anything till round about midday. That's probably when I start
Oh,
eating.
wow.
Um, not something I would recommend with people with severe blood sugar issues, because
Mm-hmm.
that it could mess it up even further. But I don't have that, and so I like to go through to around about then and practice intermittent fasting, because again that is really good for the brain. Intermittent fasting is like a clutter clearing system. It triggers the process of autophagy, which is when
Mm-hmm.
each cell clears out all the clutter, all the debris, all the metabolites that are no longer useful, and off they go, and they get cleared out of the body. So I do that. So I eat about last meal was about 6:30 in the evening, and then I might eat again at anywhere between 12 and 1, really. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I suppose that some people might think it's a bit boring, but it's basically very simple foods. Like I might have eggs scrambled in butter with a tomato salad
Mm-hmm.
for lunch. Uh, and then I'll have a couple of pieces of fruit in the afternoon, perhaps a few pecan nuts, just because I really like them. And then the evening meal, again, it's always a sort of it's a meat and two veg scenario.
Mm-hmm.
The meat will always be the main event, or the fish.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be something like a steak, or belly of pork, or something like that, or or roast lamb. That's quite popular at the moment in our house. With low carbohydrate veg. I tend to avoid starchy veg, really, because basically I just want to keep my blood sugar level under control at all times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
use a glucose monitor, but I'm kind of tempted to get one, to be honest, the more I talk about
It
them.
is curious, especially for scientists, right? And
Yeah,
you're a
yeah. You use
scientist.
one.
I don't. I
No.
don't, but I know I tend to run low
Hmm.
hypoglycemia. So you talked about intermittent fasting, and I did try that and tried the keto for about a year.
Mm.
It just wasn't for me. I need to have apples. I'm never going to
Yeah.
give up apples again. And the other thing I have found for people that suffer from any type of food addiction, I think that intermittent fasting can get a little dangerous
Hmm.
with restriction for them
Yes.
because their
Yes.
eating
Yeah.
window, then you can just go, okay, I'm going crazy here because I've
Yeah.
been starving. And so I think that's just, it can
Yeah.
be dangerous for
Definitely.
people.
I've
Yeah.
seen it in certain people as well that intermittent fasting does not suit them,
Yeah.
and because it does send their blood sugar levels all over the place. And then that can cause cravings. You know what it's like? Your blood sugar level
Hmm.
crashes, you crave something to bring it up, and
Hmm.
you're not going to crave something sensible. You're going to crave something carby, sugary, aren't you? Because it has that instant effect of bringing up your blood sugar levels. And then
And
before you know it, they've gone too high, and then you'll crash
yes,
again. So you're on
that's
that
right.
horrible roller coaster of up and down
Yes.
without being stable. So no, it's not for everyone.
Right.
I
And
think
I
so.
feel like it increases the anxiety too about, oh
Yes.
my gosh, I can't eat, I can't eat, I
Yeah.
can't eat.
Yeah.
And we're about calming the brain.
Mm.
You got to calm the brain, calm
Calm
the
the
brain,
brain.
calm the
Yeah.
brain. So any level of restriction type things can
Yeah.
shoot that anxiety through the
Yeah.
roof.
It's just
And
the
that
thought of it, I think, as well, is what shoots the anxiety up.
totally,
Even before you change your diet, just thinking
totally.
about it will, and of course, stress really messes with your blood sugar levels. Yeah.
Exactly my point. We don't need cortisol going any higher
No, no.
than it is. I want to respect your time, but I want to get in at least one more question about people that are recovering from decades of ultra processed food use. Do you have like a single piece of advice that they should have a non-negotiable when it comes to their brain and heart health that they would take away from today? What is like the most important change they could make in their life that would make the biggest impact on their brain health?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, because there are so many possible answers to that. What could you do? But I think is what we've been discussing really all along is get your blood sugar levels under control. Because by doing that, you will not only help your brain, you will help your cardiovascular system and every other system as well in your body. That is again, that whole connectivity is get your blood sugar under control, because you do not want fluctuating blood sugar levels.
Hmm.
They damage your blood vessels. They can lead to atherosclerosis, cardiovascular disease. The plaques on artery walls are created by too much sugar in the blood, which is also very inflammatory. So that's that area as well, and similarly in the brain as well. It's a major cause, I think, of
Yeah.
dementia. And so get the blood sugar level under control, and then you have your appetite better under control as well, and the
Right.
cravings as well.
Hmm. Agree.
And how do you get your blood sugar level under control? Well, that, as you say yourself, you have to be aware of how much you can do. In your case, for example, you have to go, full cold turkey, not have anything, just like an alcoholic not having alcohol. And other
Hmm.
people, for
Hmm.
example, myself, my blood sugar level is nicely under control. I can occasionally have something, and it has no, it's nice like that, but I don't really want any more now
Yeah.
because I know what the effect will be, and I don't want to go there. So it's nice to be able to do that, but then you have to know yourself. We talked about that right at the beginning about
Yeah.
knowing yourself, and
Totally.
monitoring, just being very, very aware of what works for you.
Hmm.
So yeah, that would be the one single piece of advice, I think.
I think that's huge,
Yeah.
huge.
If I was going to do a
I,
second, it would be get tested.
yeah,
So you know what all the other issues are,
right.
what to focus on.
Well, if we could end on just the last thing is talking about cholesterol because people fear eating things that are labeled high in cholesterol. Do you want to talk about your opinion on that? Because there is a lot of conversation about cholesterol, if it's good or
Yeah,
if it's bad, what should we have, what shouldn't
yeah.
we have, are statins right or statins wrong? You want to
Um,
give your 2 cents on that and maybe we can end
yeah,
on
I'm
that?
glad you asked because I do like to give my 2 cents on the cholesterol subject. Um, and the good thing is this, I think the cholesterol opinion view is starting to change, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
really pleased about that because cholesterol has been regarded as the number one enemy for just too long.
Yes,
Um,
agree.
and what we're starting to realize now is that cholesterol isn't the enemy. First of all, it's essential, and it's particularly essential in the brain. Talking of that, because and in fact, the greatest concentration of cholesterol in the body is found in the brain. There's 25% of the body's cholesterol is found there. And it's so important that the brain makes its own cholesterol. It's like an in-house supply. Um, and when you take statins, of course, you strip that cholesterol, not only from the blood, which is the aim, but also from the brain. And that's not a good thing because it's so important in the brain. It forms part of, it's actually the main part of the myelin sheath, which is the insulation that's wrapped around each neuron to protect it. And it's required, it's an antioxidant in the brain. It's also required to fire neurotransmitters. So, so that's the first thing to say about cholesterol is how important it actually is. And elsewhere, it's used to make the sex hormones in the body and to make vitamin D in the skin. So people talk about good and bad cholesterol. LDL cholesterol is bad, and HDL cholesterol is good. But in actual fact, there's no such thing as different types of cholesterol. There's only one kind of cholesterol. It's the protein carriers. LDL and HDL are proteins, and they transport cholesterol around the body. LDL transports it to various sites, and HDL transports cholesterol away from various sites and to the liver. Um, so they're both important. They both have roles. What we now realise is it's not so much your total cholesterol score, but actually the ratio between HDL and
Mm,
total cholesterol and HDL. That's the real thing there, to get the ratio right, um, as opposed to actually the overall score. And actually, fortunately, that's what doctors are now starting to. More doctors are starting to focus on. Not all. There's still this because it takes a long time to change people's the general view of things. But yeah, that's the thing that really matters. It is important, and that's why I do worry about statins because they strip cholesterol from the brain. So when I talk to people about it, and obviously I'm not going to tell people not to take what's been prescribed to them, but I do suggest that they speak to their doctor about um, the effect of cholesterol,
yeah.
removing cholesterol from the brain, and really what they need to do is get a test, a full lipid panel, is what it's called,
Okay, full
which
lipid
actually
panel.
looks at your LDL cholesterol, your HDL cholesterol, the ratio between the two, and something that really is the villain of the piece, which is your triglycerides, which are the fats circulating in your blood. In terms of cardiovascular risk, they are serious offenders. So a full panel to look at things like that, as opposed to just the score, your total score.
Yeah. So that's where people should start then is get a full lipid panel versus just,
Definitely, I would say, yeah, if you get the option to ask for that, because memory loss, and interestingly enough, is one of the listed side effects of statins. In fact, the US FDA decided to put that on the label. I think it was in 2012, sometime around then.
wow.
It went onto the packaging of statins that the one possibility of memory loss, and I've seen that in
Wow.
people I know as well who've taken
Wow.
statins, and pretty immediately started to feel the effects of the brain not working properly. Um,
Yeah, I take
yeah,
the lowest
sorry.
I take the lowest dose, like 10 milligrams
Uh-huh.
of something, because I've got familiar
Oh yeah, yeah,
hypercholesterolemia.
yeah,
So no matter how I eat, I still am high.
yeah,
I mean, my HDL is great.
yeah,
It shows my diet, but the
yeah.
LDL is elevated.
Oh, yeah. I think 1 in 500 people have that condition. In which case, yeah, it's they're the ones that probably need statins or some kind of. There are other drugs as well, uh, cholesterol lowering medication. Um, the issue they have is they can't clear LDL cholesterol efficiently. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where that comes in. So yes,
Yeah.
that's unlucky because it is about 1 in 500.
Yeah. This has been a fabulous, fabulous conversation. I hope you'll come back and visit us again
Yeah, really
sometime.
enjoyed it. Love talking to you about my
Do
favorite subjects in the world.
do you want to tell people where they can find you in your book?
Oh yeah, well, you can find it on Amazon. It's called How to Feed Your Brain,
Yeah.
and by Maria Cross.
And
Yeah.
yes. Thank you. I really appreciate your time. And if you want to
Thanks.
find out more about us, you can find us at realfoodrecoveryforyou.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. And the Real Food Recovery book, If Food Isn't the Answer, What's the Question, can also be found on Amazon today. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Been a real
Bye, guys.
pleasure. Thank you, Paige. Thank
Uh-huh.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.